Thank you everyone for joining the Resistance Bureau today. I'm your host, Nick Cheeseman, and co-hosting with me today is my colleague, Jeff Smith. How are you doing, Jeff?
Good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Now, you will have noticed that I am not the fabulous Mantale Mrochwa, our regular co-host. I'm very sad about that. I know she's a big hit with all of you out there. Sadly, Mantale is feeling a little unwell today, so I've jumped in at the last minute, and I will do my very best to live up to her very high standards. Get well soon, Mantale. We really miss you here at the Resistance Bureau. As regular viewers will know, the Resistance Bureau focuses on critical issues facing the African continent today. That includes democracy, elections, human rights, and the struggle for freedom. This is a program that spotlights the leaders at the forefront of these ongoing and critical fights and seeks to build solidarity among them. In this spirit, we are joined today by distinguished Zambian panelists who will help us to unpack the country's upcoming elections, which is set to take place on August 12th. And we'll also be discussing many of the challenges that prevail insofar as securing a free and fair vote. Our lineup of speakers today include Hakainde Hichilema, the opposition leader of the United Party for National Development, who has come extremely close to winning the presidency on more than one occasion, and some say is the front runner this year. Fumba Kuchama, who many of you will better know as Pilato, a cutting-edge artist and civic activist who is known for consistently speaking the truth to power. Shishala Kateka, a successful Zambian businesswoman and the only female presidential candidate in the upcoming election for the opposition New Heritage Party. And lastly, Linda Kasonde, one of the brightest stars of Zambia's civil society, who has an impressive track record of holding the country's elected leaders to account. For those interested in learning more about the biographical details of our fantastic speakers, please check out our website at theresistancebureau.com. There you can also catch up on all of our past shows. Videos are there and on YouTube, free to watch now, and read about our guiding vision and guidelines and principles. For today's program, you can keep track of the discussion on Twitter by following us at Resist Bureau and by using the hashtag ResistBureauLive. Right now, we are streaming on Facebook Live and on YouTube. The show will also be recorded for later distribution. Jeff, before we do a deep dive into the many issues at play in Zambia in the lead up to August the 12th, please set the scene for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick. And thanks for everyone who is joining us today. As mentioned on today's Resistance Bureau program, we are shifting our focus to perhaps the most important upcoming election in all of Africa. It takes place in Zambia 44 days from today, and the environment is heating up. As such, today's program has convened leading political figures and prominent civic activists to ask how further democratic backsliding in the country can be resisted and election rigging prevented. Zambia, of course, was once considered to be among Africa's more promising democracies. It remains one of the few countries in Southern Africa to have experienced a democratic transfer of power at the ballot box more than once, in fact, including most recently in the 2011 election. Refusing to buckle under intense pressure to fix the results in that close election, the Electoral Commission also appeared to have come of age, standing strong and separating itself from the more pliant election commissions that exist elsewhere across the region. 2011 now feels like a very long time ago. The ruling Patriotic Front, led today by a former defense minister, President Edgar Lungu, has presided over a period of pronounced political and economic decay, including massive democratic backsliding. In fact, Zambia is one of the fastest eroding democracies in the entire world. This according to the Varieties of Democracy Project, one of the most trusted sources of information on democratic progress and regression worldwide. Over the past several years, the Lungu government has taken a reckless attitude towards the political system and basic civil liberties of Zambians by harassing civil society groups, including activists on today's show, imposing harsh laws, and manipulating the coronavirus pandemic to silence dissent. The ruling party also forced through changes to the constitution that will now enable President Lungu to stand for a third term. And they have used accusations of treason and sedition in attempts to silence their opponents. This included, of course, the 127-day imprisonment of one of our speakers today, opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema. The divisive impact of these strategies has been thrown into sharp relief by the sad death and period of national mourning for founding father and former President Kenneth Kaunda, who is known for his efforts to promote national and continental unity. The fear is that this situation will decline further as Zambia heads towards general elections on August 12. Of course, we want to hear from members of today's audience as well. have your say, and many of you already have, by sending us a note to our WhatsApp number, +263 77 623 8199. If you did not catch that, the number is also available right now on our Twitter and Facebook feeds. Thanks, as always, for your constructive engagement. We have a really busy agenda today, so Nick, let's get started. Back over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Linda, I'd like to turn to you first, if that's okay, so that you can give us an overview of how things look on the ground in Zambia. From the point of view of civil society, would you say that the minimum conditions for free and fair elections are being met? And maybe you could give us a bit of a sense of how we got here, given that Zambia was once seen as a potentially promising democracy, and we're talking about it in very different tones today. Thank you. Linda, I think you're on mute. Could you unmute yourself?
Thank you, Nick. I think I can just speak generally about the current environment leading up to the elections. So we're seeing increased levels of electoral violence, skirmishes between the ruling party and the leading opposition party, UPND in particular. We're seeing definitely an unfair media coverage playing field for political actors, particularly on the state broadcaster, but also it appears certain political parties have bought more airtime or blocked the airtime for others who are trying to seek a platform on TV stations. Public gatherings and campaigns have been curtailed by the Electoral Commission on the basis of COVID and electoral violence. And it's questionable whether or not, in fact, they have the powers to do so. So these are some of the challenges that are being faced. And sorry, could you repeat the second part of your question, please?
Well, a little bit about whether or not you think we're now in a situation where it's possible to have something that could be called a free and fair election, and perhaps also your reflections on how we got here, you know, go from a situation where the opposition could win an election in 2011 to a situation where people are wondering about whether that's possible.
So maybe just to speak about how we got here. In the 2016 election, we saw the incumbent coming on a popular ticket. He was seen as carrying on the mandate of the previous president, Michael Sata, and has since 2015 been consolidating his power. And I think that the root of that is we've seen increasing levels of corruption and impunity being carried out by the ruling party. And as a result of trying to entrench themselves and hold on to power, we've seen increases in what I call attempts at legal authoritarianism, which is the attempts to use laws to strengthen your position, such as the attempt to change the constitution under Constitutional Amendment Bill number 10. We've seen the police service being weaponized against citizens. The public space has more or less shut under the auspices of the Public Order Act. We're now seeing the digital space also being shut down, which is also a platform through which not only civic actors, but political actors also play out or distribute their information. And with the coming of the Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act, the levels of fear and repression are increasing. So not only has the physical space shut down, but now we're seeing that playing out on in the digital space as well. And we've also seen the militarization of the police. Most recently, we had what's called Defense Day, and the police came full on out with tanks, helicopters, just putting their full military might on display. And this has also been happening on the public broadcaster as well. When they acquired the militarized tanks and weapons. They broadcast them on TV, and it appears that it's an attempt to try and show people what will happen if people are not, if the people don't stay in line. And also we've seen extrajudicial killings by the police, such as the death of National Prosecution Authority prosecutor Nsama Nsama, who was a mere bystander, and also Joseph Kaunda, who was a UPND supporter at the police force headquarters when UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema was being called for an interview there. So these are all very worrying trends, and also have played a role in fostering an unconducive environment for the election to take place. And it appears that the levels of impunity are unprecedented in this country. And we've seen that through various court actions that have happened over the recent past. For example, the issue over whether or not the incumbent is eligible to stand in the 2021 general elections. And you know, Chapter 1 was one of the litigants in that matter as a petitioner. And unfortunately, the court ruled that the incumbent is eligible to stand, despite the fact that he has already served 2 terms in office. So that is also a worrying trend that, you know, often the judiciary is the last line of defense. And if you can't seek redress there, it's very troubling as to where we can seek refuge for justice, rule of law, and constitutionalism. So these are all very worrying trends that we're seeing in the run-up to the election.
Thank you so much, Linda, for that really broad and comprehensive overview. I kind of want to dig down a bit on a topic that you just raised, and you mentioned, you know, the increasing legal authoritarianism that we're seeing in Zambia. And of course, you've been one of those civic leaders who's been really trying to strengthen democracy in the rule of law in Zambia. And you mentioned the recent court petition before the Constitutional Court that argued that President Lungu did not qualify for nomination because he had already served 2 terms, as you just mentioned. So just to hone in on that issue a little bit, why is the issue of term limits so important to you? And more broadly, are term limits actually needed, in your opinion, for the consolidation of democracy in Zambia and potentially elsewhere across Africa?
So I want to mention, so I'm the founder of an organization called Chapter 1 Foundation, which is an NGO that promotes and protects the rule of law, constitutionalism, good governance, and social justice in Zambia. And one of the reasons I founded the organization was the realization that democracy and the rule of law are always under threat. And this is true in any democracy anywhere in the world. And so it's important for civic actors to push back against creeping authoritarianism and anarchy and impunity by those in government, because those in government hold the instruments of power, and as such, they're the biggest breaches of the Constitution and constitutionalism and the rule of law. And so the fact that an incumbent president can't respect a term limit is a very fundamental breach of the Constitution. You know, as an incumbent, you take an oath to uphold and protect the Constitution as by law established. And the fact that those provisions of the Constitution have been abrogated is a very serious indictment on our democracy. If the term limits can't be respected, then it leaves it open to the entrenchment of a president indefinitely, such as we've seen in our neighboring countries, such as Uganda, as we saw with Robert Mugabe, and numerous other countries across the continent. So it's a really big red flag that this case did not go our way. It's unfortunate. Of course, we respect the decision of the court, but we don't have to agree with it. And in our opinion, a great injustice has been done.
Thank you so much, Linda. Mr. Hichilema, turning to you, it's very good to see you again. Thanks for taking the time to join us. We know it's very busy out there on the campaign trail. But pivoting to you here, we wanted to ask you to please tell us, as the leading opposition candidate for president in Zambia, what is your vision for Zambia as a country, your broad vision as you have laid out for the voters? And more importantly, perhaps, how are you sharing that vision with Zambian voters ahead of the August election, especially considering the many restrictions that have now been imposed by authorities, some of which are a consequence of the worsening coronavirus pandemic in the country? We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Jeff, thank you very much for your questions, but also I'm very grateful that I'm appearing on your platform today. So just to greet you, to greet Professor Chisman, Linda, and Chishala, obviously Pilato. Very nice to be with the colleagues on this platform. So I must start from the premise that this year's elections are very, very important elections, probably the most important in our recent history, so to say, because we are in a very difficult situation as a country. The state of poverty is unprecedented. Breakdown in the rule of law is never been seen before, never. I mean, the disrespect of human rights, liberties, and freedoms, it's just something that I never imagined myself, post-1991, that we will have a government, a regime like this one, that would totally disregard people's rights, freedoms, liberties. Absolutely never imagined it. Obviously, I was wrong. And I thought 1991 was a defining year for us as a people of Zambia in terms of the reintroduction of the multipartism. But we were wrong. I was wrong. Maybe I shouldn't speak for others. I was wrong. So because of this situation, this election is important because I think the people of Zambia want to deliver change of government so they can improve their lot. There's no question about it in my mind. I mean, it's very, very clear in the minds of other people as well. So for us, we expect a change of government, and I think change is written on the walls, in the trees, everywhere. So the question is that will we have a free and fair election? I think that's a very important question that we need to answer on this platform. And we don't want a situation where the election will be determined by those who count the votes. We want the election to be determined by those who vote, the people of Zambia, despite the issues that surround the voter registration, which we're concerned about, national registration card issuance, voter registration itself, and which result in the skewed, basically in a voter database, as it were, and if you like, disenfranchising certain regions of our country. That sort of discrimination is what we see even in the public sector, in terms of employment, in terms of promotion, in terms of dismissals. And may return to why we are seeking public office. We're seeking public office based on your question. The first question is really number one, couple of factors, couple of issues that drive us. Number one is to resuscitate the economy, to reconstruct this country's economy. Obviously, we want to reconstruct the social fabric of our country. But primarily, you cannot, in my view, in our view, you cannot reconstruct the social fabric which is damaged without the resources, without the opportunities. And those resources, opportunities will come from the resuscitation of the economy which has been destroyed. So that's number one for us. That's really, really what we believe needs to be done like yesterday. Once God's will, courtesy of the people of Zambia, we take public office, and hopefully nobody will stand in the way of the wishes of the people of Zambia. We have a debt, debilitating debt, unprecedented debt levels. I mean, these guys in 2011 inherited a debt around $1.9 billion, external debt. I'm not talking of domestic debt, I'm talking of external debt. Now we're sitting well over $12 billion, external debt alone. If you add domestic, pipeline debt, we are somewhere in the region of $20 billion. This is unacceptable. It's a very small economy. So for us, a very small economy, $28 billion around there. So our major priority is to get the economy going, to redress regression in the economy. And fundamentally to do that, we're focusing on ensuring that we bring back an environment that will facilitate growth, that will allow investments to come in. And therefore we can create jobs, We can provide health services to our people. We can provide food to our people, basic requirements, which today, Jeff, Prof. Chisman, as we're discussing at night time, it's dinner time in our country. Millions of families will go to bed without decent food tonight. And we want to deal with that. We want to deal with education available for every child who is school going, and it's possible. We want to make sure that really the old, the sick, the young, the orphans, the vulnerable are taken care of. All of this is only possible. And I want to be very emphatic here on your platform. We all see things sometimes in different ways, but this particular one can never be seen in different ways, in the sense that we cannot help the poor, the sick, the vulnerable without resource growth, without investment, without jobs. So we cannot share poverty. And for us in the UPND, this is a fundamental pillar on which we stand on. So economic resuscitation is very, very important to us. And we believe we'll be able to do it. We have the credibility, we have the skill, a pool of people we're working with in and outside the party, in and outside the country. Very, very, very important. And we're very confident about it. In fact, this is our strength. This is the strength we bring to the table. That's why we're seeking public office. There are many things we can say around there. Cutting wastage, very important to us. There's so much extravagance in this country today. Tell me why government ministers must drive VXs, the most expensive vehicles, which in the past, in my days in business, they were driven by business people. Today, they're being driven by ministers. Why? When there's no oxygen in hospitals, as it were. So it's a fundamental shift. Cutting wastage, releasing resources from debt service. Obviously, we have to restructure the debt, and we believe that the lenders, the portfolio of lenders will come to the table because they believe that we mean well, because we will start by ourselves walking the talk, as I said, cutting wastage, making sure that we don't have, public procurement choking out a lot of money meant for investment. And one of the areas is the road sector, which has taken so much money because of the corruption in there. But I'll talk about that. So essentially, we will release resources away from consumption to investment expenditure, to job creation, to growth, and social services provision. Number two, we want to focus on the restoration of the rule of law. I think Linda has talked about that enough. That's sufficient. There's a breakdown in the rule of law in our country. We want to deal with that right from the outset as the change of government comes in, because you cannot really invest, you cannot resuscitate the economy where there's no rule of law, where there's a total disorder. Today, Jeff, you go to a bus stop just to ride on a bus from one town to another. If you are identified to be a member of the opposition, you get lynched. You get your leg broken. If you are unlucky, you get killed by militias, ruling party militias, who are roaming the streets, and the police can't touch it because they're above the law. So we want to restore order. We want the judiciary that functions for the people. We want parliament that makes laws that don't create confusion like what we have now on this third term issue. There should have never been a misunderstanding of why someone should not serve 10 years. Should not serve more than 10 years. You asked Linda that question. It's the people of Zambia that decided that they don't want anyone to be in that state house for more than 10 years because they had 27 years of government, and they know the damage that comes with it. They know the autocratic behavior that comes with it. They know the destruction of democracy that comes with that. So we want to make sure that just general order. In fact, this is very high on our agenda because nothing will happen without respect for the rule of law. And today, the leading breaker of the rule of law and order is the government and their militias. So we'll deal with that. Number three, we want to promote inclusiveness in our country. There's so much divisiveness in our country today on an ethnic basis, political basis. It's just unacceptable. This is a country which reasonably was proud of unity, reasonable unity amongst all the ethnic groups before. It was done before. We want to return the country to this table of unity, where we will focus on inclusion, not exclusion. We will focus on opportunity for all our people, not marginalization. So this is very important to us. The next on our agenda is really to fight corruption. This corruption is a thief. It is a big, thief for resources. Takes away money from children who are in school. And it's now enriched a group of people who never have ever run a business before. The only business they've run is to be in government 5 years. They're the only guys that have liquidity. They're the only guys that use pillowcases, which are made out of cash, and flouting cash, unbelievable in our country. So we want to have a zero tolerance policy on corruption. Remember, I talked about the rule of law, restoration of the rule of law, which will be coupled with strengthened institutions, oversight institutions, institutions that will operate independently, professionally, so that selectivism is a thing of the past, as we see today. We want to focus also, another pillar is to devolve power, to allow regions to have some delegated authority, Jeff and Prof. Chisman, and my colleagues that are on this platform. So decisions, development decisions, can take account of the needs of the people in those regions. Agriculture is a good example. Countries endowed with so much agricultural potential, but agriculture is large. What does Luapula province want to do? In my view, the people of Luapula have understood certain things better than others. Fish farming is something that we want to do, but those decisions must come from the local people. The central government must support those local people. Very, very important. And indeed, you asked me, I can say, go on and on this issue. You asked me the question of reaching out to voters. There are restrictions now, huge restrictions. Media, we've talked about it. We need a country that allows media to operate independently, self-regulation. But that's not the case now. But we are aware that laws have been promulgated, as Linda has said, to restrict the media. So today, our reach is limited. Abuse of the law, again, Public Order Act. So we're having to come round to do things in a more difficult manner than ordinarily we should. And I think this is a challenge that the international community needs to be aware of, because you cannot have an election where the ground is not level, as it is at the moment. The Public Order Act has been abused over years, even before COVID came. Now COVID is weaponized against the opposition. The ruling party has no respect for the COVID guidelines. We have to abide by COVID guidelines. We appreciate that. We support, measures that are meant to curb this pandemic, but they must not be reasons why we cannot access, voters will not campaign to voters. So I think there are many things we can say. We're doing our best under the circumstances, becoming a bit more expensive, even to place adverts, Jeff, on media, certain media. We're not allowed to do that. Even when we pay money, our adverts are not played. But we've gone to court, we've won court judgments. The courts cannot implement, the media like ZNBC cannot implement court decisions. Crazy, isn't it? So, but we believe we win this election because people have decided that it's time to change. And, opinion polls are very clear that people want change. And I'm not talking against Chishala here. She's a competitor, but I think we want change. And we believe that change will come. No matter what these guys do, there will be change in this country. But we don't want a violent country. We don't want rivers of blood. We want a peaceful country that we can run, we can turn around. There you are. Thank you.
On that point, I'd like to ask you a quick follow-up. We'll make this one a bit shorter. One of the things I think people are worried about in this election is potential apathy. Apathy because there's violence, because there's COVID, as you say, because of economic difficulties. Also, perhaps apathy because people aren't sure whether, even if you win, you'll be allowed to win, if you know what I mean. They're unsure about how the playing field is, and people perhaps are less likely to go out and vote if they're not sure that the election's going to be free and fair. And Zambia, of course, has a history of very close elections, 2011, 2015, 2016. All of these elections were really quite tight. And when the election is tighter, of course, it becomes easier for the ruling party to manipulate. So what I think some of our viewers will be wanting to ask you today is, what are the concrete steps that you're putting into place to actually protect the vote? Anyone who listens to me, go on about elections or reads any of my columns will know that one of my kind of constant questions to opposition leaders is, you've got all of these great ideas, but are you doing enough to protect your vote? Are you putting party agents into the polling stations? Are you able to actually produce that alternative tally of the vote that allows you to keep the Electoral Commission honest. And I think voters of all persuasions would want us to ask you, what's the UPND actually doing to try and protect the vote in this election, which, as you said, is so important?
Yeah, Prof, thank you very much. And but also just to express my appreciation, I think on behalf of many Zambians, for your relentless fight for democracy, for rule of law, for human rights. I know when I was in detention, you spoke loudly. I've never had the opportunity to thank you for that, but thank you very much. So now your question is very clear. We understand the situation. We as UPND understand what is obtaining out there. And we are also aware of the intentions by the PF, this autocratic government, to manipulate the results, to deny citizens their right to choose leadership, the leadership that they believe will deliver for them, will take them out of poverty. So we're very alive to those issues. So two anchors. One is to make sure that part of the vote protection is to make sure that we win and win big, so that the margins are not small. We understand very well. We know what happens when the margins are narrow. And we know the behavior of many African leaders. I apologize to those that may be listening and be offended, wanting to stay in office forever. We understand it. So the margins, the turnout, margins must be driven by higher turnout, whatever the circumstances. We believe that there's enough interest, enough basically resolved by the people of Zambia. Especially the younger population, the younger voters who are overwhelming in the majority, younger and women voters. I believe they'll turn out. We are seeing it, we're on the ground, we understand what's going on. So a higher turnout is good for us, for the opposition, but also as UPND, we believe that we will have a higher share of everyone who walks to the polling station on the day. That is one side. The second side, we're conscious of what happened in 2015, when we believe we won the election 2016. I mean, people don't like numbers in this country. Prof. Chisman, this colleague sitting in State House, above the winning threshold of 50% plus one, he is in State House on account of 13,022 votes, right? 13,022 votes. And that number came after 4 or 5 days of manipulation, so we say. So we are conscious of that. So we are putting measures in place that will ensure that that does not happen. The only risk to that is the violence. I think Linda spoke about violence. The violence story is a very bad story for this country. And I'm hoping that today I was speaking to the Electoral Commission, Chief Electoral Officer, and last week I spoke to the Police Inspector General, last 10 days or so, to bring 4 parties together. The Electoral Commission, the police, the PF, the UPND, and the opposition. You hear me out? The Electoral Commission, the police, the PF, the UPND, and its opposition colleagues to the table, so that we can discuss how we can have a free and fair election, how Zambians will decide who their leaders will be, and not those that will be in the polling stations pretending to be referees in the name of the Electoral Commission officials. But it should be the people of Zambia, and also to stem violence from our elections, from our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Palata, I think that's a great moment to bring you in, because of course, one of the suggestions that's often made is that violence is committed by the youth. Often it's an unfair suggestion, of course, and often the youth are mobilized by older people. But it is something that people are concerned about in the role of party cadres. At the same time, you've been doing some quite inspirational work trying to mobilize young people to vote and trying to ensure that we bring more young people into the democratic space. I think it'd be really great for our viewers if you could tell us a little bit about, how you've been doing that, what you think the impact of a youth vote could be, and that kind of double-edged sort of role of the youth as potentially this vehicle for transformation, but also potentially pawns that can be manipulated by people within the political system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. First of all, to respond to your question, we must understand the condition in which young people of this country have found themselves in. So we are about over 80% of the Zambian population. And that is a very huge population of people and to understand that these are people that are unemployed. These are people that are economically marginalized is very wise. So we have a very huge chunk of our people, young people, that are legally qualified to participate in alcohol drinking, drug abusing, but are not legally to stand even for presidency. So it's unconstitutional for a young person in Zambia to aspire for presidency. But it is very legal for a young person to go participate in alcohol drinking. It is also very funny that this is what our power structure looks like. But also we must understand that where we are led by other people, adults that were educated for free by the government, but then they've made education expensive for the young people today. The benefit of a young person in Zambia, of being a Zambian, is nothing. The only job that we have now as young people is to worry. You can worry, you can worry, you can worry. That's your own job, and you don't have anybody to pay you for worrying. You know what I'm saying? So that's a very big problem that we have as young people. So when we engage with these people, when we speak to young people, what we are telling them is that, first of all, you haven't gotten a better share of this country. The people that are in governments today are taking so much away, not from just your present, but they are taking so much away even from your future. The young people are the present, are the future leaders, but they are also leaders of today. I like to think that the young people are the citizens of the present, but also the citizens of the future. Our fathers and our grandmothers and our grandfathers are here today. They might not be there tomorrow. So once decisions are made without the young people, once these political and democratic decisions are made of this country, on this country by people that may not be there 20, 30 years from now, then we're taking a very huge gamble. So when we speak to young people, we tell them to say, listen, you are here today and you have the potential of being alive tomorrow. Therefore, the decisions of this country, the political life of this country must be your business. The political discussions of this country must have your input. Participate in the elections, participate in the political life of your country today, because what you decide today has an effect on your future tomorrow. Unfortunately, young people today are being disempowered. We do not have jobs, so then we resort to alcohol. We do not have education because education is super expensive. So these young people grow up on the streets. These young people grow up without an education. And the only job they qualify for with these political structures is to be political cadres. And when they get engaged, and like we've seen with the PF, when these young people that are not educated are incorporated in these political structures and the party gets in power, the only job they give them is violence. So they ask them, go and attack this particular group. And these young people have no option because that's the only job that they can do to get paid. So that's the situation that we are in. This 2021 election is beyond political discussions. It's about the life of this country. It's about the life of the young people. And we speak to these people. We tell young people to say, the reason why you should vote is because you have the power to design the future of this country. You have the power to decide the texture of this country's future. If young people do not vote now, people that believe that young people are future leaders only will decide what should happen in this country. And we don't want that. We want young people that will participate now so that they decide, they vote for values, they vote for ideals that are applicable to them now and also applicable to them in the future. And we speak to them because that's the life of this country. If we are going to strengthen our democracy in this country today and in the future, we must make sure that we invest such information. We invest in these young people, because if these young people are not equipped for democracy, are not equipped to participate in the democratic processes of this country, tomorrow the democracy that we have today may not even exist. We are told today, everybody's screaming when somebody attacks another member of an opposition or any other group of the party. They will tell you that these are politics. When people steal money and they come to you and they'll tell you these are politics. But that's not the nature of our politics. That's not what we want this country to be defined for. So we are engaging young people because this is about the life of this country. These elections and like every other election is about the life of this country. It's about the democracy of this country. And young people are essential. Young people are key in deciding the direction of this country. We also are speaking to young people because it is their responsibility. We believe that accountability must start by, first of all, understanding what your responsibility is as a citizen, and also your obligation. So these are young people that must decide their leader. So when they know that they've decided their leader, they have the power to choose their president, they have the power to choose their MP, they must be reminded that that same power to choose the president, that same power to choose the member of parliament gives them the power to hold these leaders accountable throughout their term. So we are engaging young people to say, your power to hold leaders accountable starts the moment you go and vote. Don't just register to vote, go out and actually vote. When you vote for a particular candidate or for a particular party, you have the power to hold these leaders accountable until the next election. So we speak to them on that basis, and with the understanding that democracy cannot survive without the people. So it's the people, by the people, and for the people. And ignorance is the poison for democracy. So we are doing everything possible to, first of all, to fight the ignorance, the political ignorance that exists, by making sure that we enlighten the young people, we engage them, we tell them of what they should do and what must be done and what they should expect in return. So this election and what we speak to young people is, this is a decider for which direction your country should go to. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pilato, for your eloquent words, as always. I'd like to stick with you just for a moment and ask a brief follow-up question, because I know you've been very outspoken on the series of repressive laws that have been recently passed in Zambia. We've read some of your articles that have been published in media outlets, for example. Many of these laws, of course, are seen by critics as cynical ploys by the government to stifle free speech and violate human rights in the lead up to and during the election. So if you could really briefly, maybe 1 or 2 minutes before we turn to Chishala, tell us about some of these measures, including the cybersecurity law, which I know you've been particularly outspoken about. What have you and your colleagues done to both resist their implementation and counter this ongoing government repression?
Yes, so first of all, we must understand that the power of the people is not just in numbers. The power of the people is in their ability to contribute thoughts, to contribute ideas. In a country of 18 million people, the power of our country is not in counting heads, it's in counting how many ideas are we able to bring together. And democracy gives us an opportunity to benefit from so many of our people when we give them power to contribute and hear what their contributions are. Freedom of expression is a right, is a freedom that's constantly under threat. And what that means is that people are scared to contribute ideas. People are scared to speak out. And once people are scared to contribute, people are scared to participate in the political discussions of their country, you deny yourselves ideas from flowing from one mind to the other. That is a danger. In my personal capacity, what I do is I do not follow unjust laws. So first of all, I understand as an artist, my ability, my justification, my definition as an artist demands that I express the ideas that I own. Therefore, the freedom to express my own ideas defines who I am as an artist. Like a footballer, I must be able to kick the ball. If I'm denied the right to kick the ball, then I'm not a footballer. I'm an artist and I'm a human being. Human beings are expressive beings. Therefore, I have to express myself. Coming to the other part of the stuff what we're doing, I'm sure you know about the Bill 10, which myself, Chapter 1 and other organizations have even taken to court because we feel this is a move by the government to deny us the right to use social media and internet to express ourselves. because that's also, we feel that right is, I mean, that law is designed to protect the people that want to take away our ability to speak and express ourselves on issues that matter to us. So I don't know if that's beyond two minutes, but that's just a rough idea of what we are doing in addressing repressive laws. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Pilato. Madam Kateka, turning to you. Thank you for your patience. And thank you, of course, for taking the time to join us today. We know you have a very busy schedule. As a candidate in the upcoming election, we'd like to ask you, what do you see as Zambia's major problems right now, today? And how does your party propose to tackle them? And relatedly, we've talked a bit about this, but we'd love to get your thoughts on this. How confident are you, or perhaps not confident are you, in the credibility of Zambia's formal institutions that are mandated to decide and to essentially referee electoral contests? So we're namely talking here about the Zambian Electoral Commission, the police, and the judiciary. We'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I know that it's pretty obvious what the problem is, and it falls on leadership. We have a leadership that has really led us within a very short time, from 2011 to 2021, into a very abysmal state of the economy. That is pretty obvious, and it's something that everybody knows. But what obviously that has led to the economy not doing well at all. But what is really, really worrying are the effects of the poverty that has come upon the Zambians. Now, a person that is living in poverty is not only is going to start making decisions that are short-term rather than long-term, and rather than something that is beneficial to everybody. So even these coming elections, you find people making decisions that are really contra to what they should because of the poverty. You find people, choosing somebody simply because they can come and throw 100 kwacha at them, which 100 kwacha is not going to last them even a week. So those are the sort of problems that we're talking about. So our situation has become really, really complex. It's not a matter of just resolving the economic situation, but we have a lot of mindset issues to deal with. We have a lot of unraveling to do, so to speak, in terms of getting the country back to where it was. I think that the really, really sad thing about this whole thing is, somebody's voted into government and you're thinking, okay, this person went to university, so we must be in a good space. And then they start making decisions, including putting in place quite a lot of incompetent people surrounding them and leading us into the situation where we are. So what are we saying as the Heritage Party is that the most important thing that we've got to do is really putting the right people in the right positions. I'll give you an example. When you look at the central bank, you can have a commercial banker, you can have an investment banker, or you can have a central banker. So what does our government do? They take an experienced central banker and replace this person with a middle tier commercial banker. Do you see what I'm saying? The sort of problems that we face, that the government, the leadership is doing. Now, you have asked me about how credible the supportive institutions are. So, because of the government that we have, which is turning out to be repressive, which is turning out to be not really opening up the space for people to do what they're supposed to do, you find that a lot of these institutions, the people working in there, are looking at safeguarding their positions, and therefore the decisions that they make are more in line with government rather than doing the right thing. As Heritage Party, we've been speaking to the police, speaking to the ECZ and saying, you know what, you need to be as professional as possible. That's the best way to safeguard the positions that you have, rather than towing the current government's directives and things like that. So we are very, very concerned about the conduct of the police. We are concerned about the conduct of the ECZ, because we do not see their behavior going to lead to a free and a fair election at all.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to say, one of the reasons we're particularly delighted to have you here with us is that you're a female candidate, and this is quite a male-dominated election. I know, most of the big parties have selected female running mates, but I've been doing a number of conversations recently, and it's quite clear to me that in terms of the candidates at almost all levels of the political system, we don't seem to have many female candidates. And I think that's not an accident, right? That's partly a product of the kind of politics that we've been talking about over the last hour. So we'd really like to ask you, first of all, how difficult do you feel that it is for women, to get heard and to be given the space they deserve within a fairly male-dominated political space? And secondly, also, how will you ensure that whatever happens in the elections, that you and your party will continue to play a role in between this election and the next one? Of course, one of the things people sometimes say about political parties is they only come to life during elections. So some of the things people have been asking us, in the preparation for this show is, what are the parties going to do to make sure they continue to play a positive role in politics once the election's over? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nick. I have worked most of my life, in fact, all my life, in a male-dominated world. And I haven't come across anything untoward by the fact that I'm female. So what I've found is that when you do your work well, when you are professional, etc., people will pay heed, people will pay attention when you do make sense. But it's when you do not make sense, that's when they take, when you start to do things that you really shouldn't. So I have been heard. When I do speak, people listen. And well, they actually say, well, this is a breath of fresh air because you're discussing issues. We tend to discuss issues rather than attacking other political parties or even attacking the ruling party. It's unfortunate that you have to mention these things, but they do happen. So I actually haven't had a situation where people put me down simply because I am female. Yeah. So what we are finding is that there are many people out there. I know that currently people are of the view that the race is between the PF and the UPND. But before we started doing what we're doing, we did our research and we found that in the last few elections, less than 50% of the people voted. And why? Because they were not happy with the status quo, the political status quo. So there are quite a number of people who feel that they are looking for an alternative. And we found that a number of people are saying, you know what, we've had 6 male presidents, and it is time that we try a female president. So we haven't written ourselves off, and we are hoping that we will go through come August the 12th, in which case our role will be very, very clear. However, should we not go through, we intend to become a very formidable, credible opposition. We are of the view that the current government, the current party have really lost that moral right to provide credible opposition because of the way they have conducted themselves. it's amazing, but yeah, there it is. So we are not looking to die after the elections. We are intending to continue being very relevant after the elections.
Thank
you
you
so much, Chishala. What we're going to do now, and thanks to everyone for those really insightful responses. I think this has been an incredibly informative discussion. So thank you to everyone. What we're going to do now is Nick and I, for this portion of the program, we're going to check in on our WhatsApp channel to see what questions we've received for today's speakers. We've received quite a few. They've continued to come in during this program. We understand that we have thousands of people tuning in live right now, one of our more popular programs to date, which is great. So thanks everyone to tuning in. One of the questions I received actually just recently for you, Mr. Hichilema, this question comes from a Zambian law student in her final year. Her name is Yamakani Banda, and she asks you, sir, what is your take on the current handling of the coronavirus pandemic by the PF government? And would you blame the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases on the relaxation of restrictions by the current administration? What, if anything, would you have done differently if you were president?
Thank you, Jeff. May I take this answer now?
Absolutely,
if
please.
You permit me. Well, first and foremost, the UPND, Againde, UPND, I think any genuine opposition leader, any genuine citizen, a serious citizen, for that matter, we are all agreed. We are all agreed that the coronavirus pandemic is deadly, and we must do everything within our powers, within our capacities, to support measures that contain the coronavirus negative effects. Everybody is affected if you are not infected. Everybody. It's more or less like saying what we used to say about HIV/AIDS, right? So we as UPND are supportive of the health measures, science, social distancing, wearing masks, all of those issues, reducing crowds. No question about it. What we believe is not being done correctly now, and we remedied by this government, and I must put it very clearly that the PF has failed to manage this pandemic. The PF has not had a serious program of containing the coronavirus. And I can say that from a factual point of view. One, the PF has not put enough resources on the fight against coronavirus. Absolutely none. You can see that the resource envelope depleted because of the destruction of the economy. I must have said in the beginning that these guys inherited an economy which was growing at 6% plus, and they've worked it down to minus. Probably this year, if we're lucky, we'll get 0 point something. I mean, it's incredible how in a short period of time, poor leadership can destroy a promising economy. So within that decline in the economy, they've not allocated proportionately sufficient resources to the fight against coronavirus. So that's number one. Number two, the resources that have been availed to them, even from donation, all of us, including myself here, Nick, Jeff, we've made donations towards the fight against COVID, have not been managed properly. We've seen the absence of critical, if you like, personal protective equipment. With first line, fighters against COVID. Who are they? The medical staff. No personal protective equipment to them. Exposing our dear, valued, valuable medical staff, well-skilled, to basically infections and death. Many of them have died. I think that's the carelessness of the PF government. Questions that, does the PF government care about anything to do with running a country properly? No, they don't. They're in government for different reasons. To look after themselves, not to look after the people of Zambia. Very clear, factual. If there is no oxygen, how can there be no oxygen, Nick? Honestly, for heaven's sake, and the listeners. How can there be no oxygen in hospitals? As we're talking now, someone is dying in a hospital at UTH, say, Levi Mwanawasa Hospital, somewhere, because there's no oxygen. Really? Where are the priorities? They're in the wrong place. They are geared towards procurement for roads, because that's where the corruption is possible. Procurement for fertilizer, because that's where corruption is possible. So we will shift resources. Immediately we take office, we'll shift resources from such, if you like, unnecessary expenditure to, limited as resources may be, towards the fight against COVID. Because without us bringing COVID under control, we have no chance in hell in managing the economy. Because the resources, the skills are being depleted. There's now a fear factor. Remember first, even the vaccines we're talking about, we were led to access the COVAX support because there's just no leadership in this sphere. We intend to put in place a very specific, robust, anti-coronavirus and a pandemic fight, if you like. Resource support, moving resources away from consumption. Earlier I talked about this luxury spending that goes on and on and on recklessly, and direct those resources into the health sector. We've actually already asked this government to bring back the doctors that they've removed. They've fired doctors who are asking for their allowances only. How the hell can someone call themselves leaders and you fire doctors at this time, who are asking for just to have their allowances paid? How can anyone do a thing like that? So we've asked the government to bring back this medical, personnel. If they don't bring them back, as I said, God's will, courtesy of the people of Zambia, in 50, 60 days time, we'll bring them back. Very, very important. And we'll place a premium on the first line defenders of us. No buying expired drugs. We'll make sure that oxygen expenditure on oxygen plants across the country, in the provinces, basic things like cylinders. Sometimes the oxygen is there at the oxygen plant, limited oxygen plants, there are no cylinders. How? I mean, come on. This is a joke. This is not how you run public affairs. So we will shift money from consumption into, for example, an enhanced health budget, so that the basics are there. PPEs, oxygen, right? Medical staff, better remuneration. This is the time we should remunerate nurses who are exposed to COVID now than ever before. This is the time for us. Again, God allowing, people of Zambia allowing, we're in office. This is the time not to reward politicians. Cabinet, this is the time to reward a laboratory worker in a hospital so that the testing is done. The levels of testing are low currently, will improve them. Even the numbers we're being taught, Nick and Jeff, they're not true. I can confidently tell you that those numbers are not true because there's not enough testing. Absolutely. There's not enough, vaccines. In the last 1 week, they've been doing a second round of vaccines to those that vaccinations, to those who got the first round. There is nothing. My children went to a hospital yesterday. There was nothing there. They moved from one hospital to another. This government is exposing Zambians to a death sentence, to death sentences. This is unacceptable. This should not be allowed. And the people of Zambia, nice as they are, they're watching the situation. But I think that's why they want change now. They know that with the change of government, my sister, with due respect, I think the people have decided that change will come, and it's coming the UPND way. I'm sorry to say that, but that's the truth. They, as citizens, expect that the UPND leadership will put in a new, different program. I want to liken what we will do after the change of government to what Biden did after exiting Trump. Trump just was something on many things, but more important on the fight against this pandemic. There comes Biden, clear program, as we intend to do, and the American people feel safer now and feel protected, and that the money is being spent on the fight against COVID. We will do just that, but we also know that the goodwill that we'll bring to the table, even when our resource envelope is small, the treasury has been depleted, we believe we'll get enough support, friends of Zambia, within the country, friends of the people of Zambia, within the country. Many of us, charity begins at home, including myself here. I think we'll stretch a little bit more of family resources to save someone's life out there. But we only do that because we know that the money will be in safe hands. And many things we can say, but that's my answer to my young Yamakali Banda. And I just want to say to Yamakali Banda, you have a duty to protect yourself by voting correctly on the 12th of August and deliver a government that will protect you, first, against this pandemic, 2, keep you in school until you graduate, 3, when you graduate, give you an opportunity for a job or for a business opportunity. You know, Nick and Jeff, I started working for myself at a very young age. Many people thought I was employed when I was 29, 30. I was already working for myself. But we want to give those opportunities to other young people. Very, very important to work, to do business. And there are many things that ought to happen in order to give life, real life, opportunity to young people. Pilato talked about that the future belongs to the people, the young people. It's true. But the young people, this election, have a decision to make. An opportunity to better their lives, or to die out of COVID, or out of hunger, or indeed crime, because the opportunities are not there. Choice is the people of Zambia, and I believe they'll make the right decision. This is not a sales pitch. This is reality on the ground. It's really sickening to see the absence of clear policy direction on the COVID, clear resource allocation, clear management of those resources, and accountability. It's unacceptable, completely unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chisale. We'll come to you in just a moment. But I want to go back to Linda now, because it's been a while, Linda, since we came to you. Thanks for your patience. Linda, I'd like to ask you about the state of Zambian civil society. You know, one of the things we know that's been really important in Zambia in the past in resisting repression is civil society unity. We could think back to the Oasis Forum that defeated Frederick Chiluba's attempt to get a third term. And one of the things that concerns me, I suppose, a little bit, you know, looking at Zambia now, having done research on the country for 10, 15 years, is that it seems to me that civil society is quite divided at the moment, that we don't have the sort of unity we did at the time of the Oasis Forum. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your perspective on that and what's being done right now to kind of build that unity within civil society as we head towards the elections. Thank you. Linda, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Nick, for that question. I think civil society, like every other sector in this country, has been affected by the polarizing nature of the political environment. So you're either for government or anti-government, and that's how you're perceived and labeled. And civil society has fallen victim to that as well. And it has been a deliberate ploy of the incumbent government to actually divide and rule by causing division in professional associations, the church, sponsoring civil society organizations to spearhead their agenda. And just also, more importantly, what has made the work of civil society more difficult is that the ordinary citizens are also afraid. There's an element of fear and intimidation of the ordinary citizens. So even if civil society are championing various causes which the people support, because people feel that they're afraid of being arrested, harassed, having smear campaigns done against them, or even attacked physically. People don't feel that they can come out and support these causes either physically by coming out and demonstrating, or sometimes people even guard what they say online. In fact, very often these days, people feel, especially with the advent of the cybersecurity and Cybercrime Act. People feel that they're under increased surveillance, and there will be reprisals if they stand out and join certain causes that have been spearheaded. But I think it's important to assure the Zambian people that there is, it may not be very large, but there's a very strong cohort of civil society activists who've been pushing back against this repression, against this atmosphere of fear, intimidation, against the breaches of the rule of law and the Constitution. And that group is solid. And I'm happy to see some people joining that group. There's several artists like Pilato who have also joined us in civil society, and other artists who are voicing their concerns publicly now, and other people who may have been afraid previously but are speaking out now. But I think the feeling is that all is not lost. And I say so because when the Constitutional Amendment Bill was published, very few people knew about what the implications of that bill were, which were essentially to entrench the current regime. And when Chapter 1 and the Law Association of Zambia took that matter to court, I was extremely worried because no one really seemed to know what was going on. But once the public was sensitized as to the dangers of the bill, we saw a huge outpouring of support from ordinary citizens who basically carried that campaign to its fruition, which was the defeat of Bill number 10. And that wouldn't have happened without people rising up. So it's not that these things don't happen. There is hope. People realize what is at stake for them. And when called upon to do so, they will raise their voice if they feel it is in their interest. So all is not lost. I don't think that the people of Zambia will allow themselves to be taken for granted. They will do what they feel they have to do to protect their interests. And civil society, likewise, will continue to champion the causes it's always done in the past and will rise to the occasion as and when the need requires.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Linda. Shishala, pivoting back to you here, the questions we've received from you, from the audience, have really sort of fallen along two lines. So I'm going to ask you on both of those. And we have run a bit over, just to acknowledge that. So keep your comments a bit shorter if you could. One of the questions we received had to do with people asking why you entered the political space a bit late and whether or not you anticipate having a real impact on the election. So what is your criticism, or rather, what is your response to that criticism? And one of the questions we received is, if you don't win come August, what will your priorities be moving forward as a private citizen to advance needed democratic reforms in Zambia? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. A lot of people assumed that I joined politics rather late. I've actually been in politics since 2001. I've been in Heritage Party since then, working in the background because of what I was doing. And also, even this time, because of what we are talking about and the regime that we have, as Heritage Party, we didn't actually enter the race late. We were working at the grassroots level, countrywide, quietly, because we didn't want to attract attention to ourselves. We actually went out there to speak to the people, and we've continued to do that. It's just that we do our politics a little bit differently from most people. So we didn't enter the race late. We actually believe that yes, we will have an impact. I think that people should watch the space in this last few days before the elections, and that's the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I know people have assumptions of what they think they will see come August the 12th. My brother HH there was just reminding me, people have decided. I think that no one person is very sure about what is going to happen on that. So we intend to go out there and do the best that we can. Towards these elections, we intend to run a hard race. So let's see what happens. The second question, I believe, is should we not go through? What do we intend to do? Linda's just been talking about how people feel that they can't speak openly. I think that before I entered the political arena, I was one of those where you want to play safe and you mind your own business. But the way things are in Zambia is we cannot afford to not speak out, because what we are losing is so much more than simply just our lives, if you see what I mean. I mean, I can be comfortable in my own right, but what is the point? What is the point when my neighbors are suffering on the left side, on the right side? So this is not the Zambia that we know. This is not the Zambia that we have known. And this is not the Zambia that we want to live in. So if we want to make a difference, and we can, I just find that it's unfortunate that a country that is so well endowed can find itself in a situation like this. So I will do my bit to add to the Zambian voices. So when you look at the Heritage Party, we talk about let Zambians win, because every time something happens in Zambia, we find that it's the Zambian people that lose. We lose out in everything. When there's a deal, we lose out. So we are saying that the time has come for Zambians to win. Not a political party, not a president, not any person, but the actual citizens.
Thank you so much. Palazzo, I'm going to come to you. I think the first thing I'd like to ask you really is about, there's been a lot of talk recently about Patriotic Front, systems for kind of empowerment funds for the youth, and whether or not these are basically ways of trying to co-opt the youth into supporting the ruling party. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is how much you're worried about that kind of attempt to use kind of government programs to co-opt younger people. The second, given that your focus and your interest in digital rights, which you've already spoken very eloquently about tonight, is whether or not you fear that the government might try and impose something like an internet shutdown, which, as I understand it, is currently in place in Eswatini, where we're starting to see protests for democracy, and how you think Zambians could try and respond to something like an internet shutdown if it were to be put in place around the elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, what I feel should be done, what I feel is a problem, is that the current government lacks the ability to analyze the problems of the young people. And when you want to find a solution to a problem, the first step should be in your ability to analyze, in your analysis of the problem. Their lack of understanding of the problem, their lack of the ability to diagnose the problem correctly denies them the ability to even respond to young people's needs and issues perfectly. What that also means is that if we continue on this path of guesswork, my fear is that the government will give millions and millions of kwachas to young people, thinking that they are solving the problem. Meanwhile, they'll be deepening the problem, because they, in their thinking or the lack of it, they think that young people just want to be given money. They just want to be given money. But what is money in an economy that is crashing? What is if you give me $1 million kwacha, which I can only use to get a Coca-Cola, what good is it? Young people are not stupid, and young people do understand that the value of money is so much connected to the state of the economy, to the state of the country. And if we live in a country where everything is crashing, even if you gave me $10 billion, I would still not enjoy it because everybody wants to benefit from it. So that's my biggest fear. That's my biggest problem. The secondly, on the internet shutdown, it is almost certain that there's going to be an internet shutdown in this country. And what we are trying to do as civil society organizations and just as an individual is to think around that possibility, that reality. If there was an internet shutdown in Zambia, what is it that we could do? I don't think there is much that we can do at the moment, or I don't think there's much that I can share on this platform at the moment. But I would assure you and the listeners that we're obviously thinking about that, and we're thinking of how we can circumvent that reality. Otherwise, everything is possible. Everything negative is possible because the negatives are in control. So anything terrible is possible. Thank you. I hope I do have answered your question. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks for all the great and candid answers to those questions. Just on a personal note, before I hand back to Jeff, myself and some of my friends in Southern Africa lost one of our best friends just before coming on air, and it was pretty tough to come on, but it's a really important topic. I've really enjoyed listening to you all, and just for those friends who know I'm talking about, this one was for Paul. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Nick. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I think given all the questions we received in this brilliant discussion, we could have done another 90 minutes on this program. And Nick, maybe we will moving forward as we get closer to the Zambian election on August 12th. We also want to thank everyone who tuned in today who could have been watching the England-Germany game. The last time I checked, it was 0-0 in the 65th minute, in case anyone was wondering. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thanks to our brilliant panel, HH, Gishala, Linda, and Pilato for joining us. You are incredible. Our entire team really genuinely looks forward to keeping in touch with all of you and to tracking and highlighting your important work as we move ahead towards the election on August 12th. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with the Resistance Bureau and our entire team by visiting our website and by subscribing to our newsletter there. We also encourage you to follow our social media platforms on Twitter and Facebook. We're also on Instagram and YouTube. We really hope you'll join these important discussions as we continue to bring to you some of Africa's most brilliant and dynamic thought leaders, activists, artists, and other professionals. As a final note, putting this show together would not be possible if it wasn't for the incredible team effort that keeps bringing it to life. Thank you to our amazing advisory council, and a big shout out to our colleagues, Peter Dory, and of course, Ndondo Msaka, who are working hard behind the scenes to make this show a success. And to Mtade Mloshwa, we think you're watching today, our usual co-host and our dear friend. We'll see you back here soon. Please get well in the meantime. For myself and today's co-host, Nick Cheeseman, thank you so much for joining us. Be safe out there, keep fighting the good fight, and we'll hope to see you for our next program.